Hello everyone, on to game number 5 in the Congo campaign, and as usual I have a few things to confess, omissions from the previous scenario, none of which I'm hoping would have had any impact on the final result of the game. The most significant one though was that Mary Kingsley's character, going into that game number 4, actually had 4 domains of knowledge, and I hadn't spotted until afterwards that once you acquire 4 domains of knowledge, you replace the 2-star card with a 3-star card, so all her characteristics and abilities have improved. The reason I say that didn't have an impact on the final result of the game is that I actually played Mary Kingsley's character quite conservatively in that previous scenario. Didn't put her at any great risk because I was aware that she was already in a poorly state. So I think her characteristics, her boost to her characteristics wouldn't have come into play too much in that game anyway. And the other omission, which I know wouldn't have had a result on the impact, was that the reporter, I forgot to use his special characteristic, which is at the end of the game, for every 3 victory points you've scored, you roll a D6, and for each success you get an additional victory point. So Mary Kingsley's group lost the game 11 victory points to 17. So in other words, her group would only have rolled 3 D6 with the potential of an additional 3 victory points. So it would only have taken her up to 14. So it didn't change the result of the game. Anyway, as I said before, rather, these rules, there's an awful lot to try and incorporate and remember in these rules, anyway, even without the campaign special rules for the scenarios in the campaign. So hopefully it's not had too much of an impact on the overall storyline. Okay, so in the last game, Ujuwa won his first game of the campaign. So he gets to choose the primary. He gets first choice of the journey route between adventures. So he's going to go for the over swift water, which is the only one that allows him to boost this spiritual link track. So for that, he rolls a d6, and if it gets a 5 or more, he ticks off 2 boxes on that spiritual link track. Otherwise he ticks off only 1 box. So he got success. So things are finally beginning to work out for Ujuwa. So we tick off 2 boxes there, and then he rolls a d8 on the random events chart. Every time I've rolled on this chart, I've always ended up having something attacked by cannibals, number 2, but let's see if we can do better this time. Number 1, even worse. Sickness ravages your camp. At the beginning of the next adventure, roll 1d8 for each of your groups. If you roll a failure, remove 1 figure for this adventure only. Blimey. Right. So, make a note of that for game number 5. Sickness. Okay, and then Mary gets to choose the second choice at the route. So she is going to go for, I think, through the thriving jungle, and that's because I'd really like to get a medicinal plant, so that her health can improve. So first of all, we roll to see on a d8, we roll to see how long the journey takes. So rolling a d8, and a success is 3 months, failure is 4, but she now has a bearer. Yeah, she now has a bearer, so that might have improved. Right, so that's 7. That's a success. So that means it takes 3 months, but with a bearer, you roll a d6, and each success reduces that time by a month, and it's a success. So it's only taken her 2 months. I cross off 2 boxes here, and then on the random event chart, to get these medicinal plants, we need, on a d8, we need 4 or more. 3. Right, it says you come across a small village, one inhabitant of which decides to join you. Add 1 auxiliary to your expedition. Right, so that means she gets a second bearer, which is not to be sniffed at. And that's all the journeying, so now we're on to the game itself. Okay, this is the setup for scenario 5 then. This is called Encounters in Hostile Lands, and essentially it's now dense cover terrain. So this is blocking terrain, this type of rocky outcrop. All this is just movable, just to signify that now the cover roll is D8 rather than D6 in open terrain. It's now dense cover. Across the middle of the table, however, there is D10 Dangerous Terrain, forming a complete line from one corner of the table to the other, and it consists of 6 separate areas. Each one has a discovery token in. Same kind of procedure as previous games. 4 of them are finds and 2 of them are mishaps, so they will add to victory points at the end of the game depending on what they are. And each group starts from an individual corner, so this is Mary's group here, and the idea is that the character in each group has to exit by the other corner to get to gain knowledge and to secure victory points. Now this is meant to be hostile territory as well. It's the territory of the Fang tribe. So once a group enters any dangerous terrain, it can trigger attacks from the Fang, who aren't represented on the table, but the groups that enter these dangerous terrain areas, and any group within short distance of that area as well, is shot at with poisoned darts, which can inflict injury, obviously. So it's going to be very difficult to get across this terrain, and of course the groups are going to meet in the middle, meaning that there's a sort of hostile encounter between the 2 groups as well. I've already rolled for the sickness that afflicted this Ujuwa's group, and he's lost 3 figures already before the game even begins. He's lost a pygmy archer, a normal archer, and a young warrior so far. And now we're ready to go with the first phase of the game. It's only a short 5 turns, and then it will end somewhere in the 6th turn, depending on dice roll. So it's going to be a fairly short game, but I have put it on a slightly smaller playing surface, just to allow me to join both sides of the table up with all this dangerous terrain. Off we go. Okay, then in phase 1 of turn 1, each side has just made lots of movement using both totem cards and the action cards. So both sides have moved closer to the middle of the table, and all their groups on each side have moved. So that's the situation at the end of phase 1 of turn 1. In phase 2 of turn 1, the terrain started to cause problems. This group entered into this dangerous terrain here. They're scouts, so they didn't trigger the dangerous terrain table. They did trigger the poisoned arrows, and the reporters group, which is through there, suffered quite badly. That group tried to enter this terrain here and rolled on the dangerous terrain table first and uncovered some human remains, which deterred the group from actually entering the terrain. They've actually lost 2 figures now because of the poisoned arrows. And over here, this group of pygmies have also, they're now down to 1 figure because they lost one figure at the start of the game to sickness, and another one due to poisoned arrows coming out of this terrain that had been triggered by this group entering it. And they successfully uncovered some artifacts, but in using the Kirangozi, they've picked up a stress token there, which is going to stop them doing anything for the rest of the turn. And that's about it for that phase. Couldn't move so many groups in this particular phase. So in phase 3 of turn 1, this group entered the dangerous terrain again. The bearer stood on a trap, which he was released from, luckily. The poisoned arrows inflicted 1 hit, which was then saved, and the discovery turned out to be a mishap in that the cannibals' cauldron was detected, and each figure had to roll a D10, and on a 1 they would have left the table in fright, and they all survived. So the group came out of that unscathed in the end, albeit without finding a discovery. Over here, this group, the card I played was the only one available, which was 1 shooting and 1 movement, so that was the movement. The shooting, they were the only group within range of anything, i.e. the pygmy, the solitary pygmy on the other side of the terrain, but unfortunately they couldn't do anything because they have this panic stress token. And in the Ujuwa's part of the game, part of the turn, they also suffered another stress token as well from influence, but the other 2 groups that Ujuwa tried to affect didn't get any stress tokens. Ujuwa used his sorcery card and took some extra stress tokens as well to boost its effect, and successfully got 2 successes in the Mandrel's Dance ritual, which meant that he was able to draw 3 totem cards and pick one of them and put the other 2 back in the deck, shuffle them back in. But it does mean he's now got 3 stress tokens that he's going to have to get rid of. Now on to turn 2. Okay, end of phase 1 of turn 2. Mary's side have moved these 2 groups up a little bit closer to the tree line, and survived various poisoned arrow attacks and so on. The scouts on Ujuwa's side turned up another mishap there, with the consequence that they are now paralysed with fear and won't be able to move or take any action in the next phase of the turn. And Ujuwa's side moved up 4 groups, so basically just passive movement, but The entering the dangerous terrain over here, the pygmies encountered a group of leopards, and they successfully inflicted injuries on them, with the result that they have now picked up a bulky loot token, so that is going to slow down their movement in future. But they excuse me, they did also turn up this discovery there, so that's good news for them. On the other group of pygmies, unfortunately though, no longer exists, because they attempted to enter this terrain here and were there was only one surviving figure, and he died from poisoned arrows. This group here are a little bit closer, so there's going to be an encounter with Mary's side in the not too distant future. And now on to phase 2, turn 2. Okay, at the end of phase 2 of turn 2, this group of bunduki here find themselves not where they intended to be. They are actually trying to move into this dangerous terrain here, but were inflicted with some disaster. I forget what it was, but it drove them in another direction, and they've ended up in that terrain there. Over this end of the table, the warriors of Ujuwa's side have won the race to that token there. The adventurers would have got there first, but they also had to flee from this dangerous terrain, and as a result the warriors moved in instead, picked up that token, and that was about it really. There was quite a lot of poisoned arrows coming out of this terrain, but none of it none of it actually inflicted any injury. So now we're on to the final phase of... Oh, hang on, yeah, there was the scouts there are down to 2 figures now. They actually had a casualty from poisoned arrows. So now we're on to phase 3 of turn 2. Right, quite a lot happened in the last phase of turn 2. The adventurers and the warriors there have been in melee. The adventurers came off worse for it. They lost 2 figures, but one of them, they used the reckless roll and drew 2 additional stress tokens to save one of the figures. And then over here, this group of bundukis on Ujuwa's side have finally got into that terrain there. Picked up a discovery which they regard as remains that they're going to be able to use in their rituals. There was some... They did lose a figure to... It was either entering the dangerous terrain, the result of that, or the poison arrows, one or the other, but they've lost the figure now. Ujuwa tried to cast a ritual and was a bit too ambitious and failed, so he's picked up this token, but rather than lose his life, he sacrificed one of his group using the special rule for his character, and that's the end of turn 2. So now we're on to turn 3. Okay, first phase of turn 3, and Mary's column is making a dash for the corner now. So a lot of her groups have moved over to this side of the tree line, and Mary herself with her soldiers is just about to come through the tree line as well. She survived unscathed entering the dangerous terrain and being attacked by poison arrows as well. Unfortunately, a group of adventurers completely wiped out now by these warriors. Reduced down to 1 figure and had 4 stress tokens on it, so if that happens you immediately remove the group, so the adventurers are out of the game. The Rugger of Mary's column are Also moving up, excuse me, and yeah, that's about it. That's about it for that phase. Now we're on to phase 2, turn 3. Okay, in that phase, both sides played an influence card, so there was a bit of swapping of stress tokens and so on, but no movement of any of the groups or any fighting or firing. So now we're on to the final phase of turn 3. Okay, apologies for the poor lighting. It's getting very dark outside with gloomy weather. Anyway, in this turn, in this phase of the turn, last phase of turn 3, Mary's group definitely won out there. This group of soldiers fired on the warriors there and managed, through the terrifying death roll, to actually kill the talking drum, Kuva, the talking drum. So that will be an effect. That will have an effect on the campaign, and reloaded their muskets there. But the Rugga fired their muskets. Sorry about the focus as well. Fired their muskets into the bunduki and killed 2 of them. So there are now only 2 figures left out of that original group of 5. So now we're on to turn 4. End of phase 1 of turn 4. Mary's making a break for the corner. Now, you will see whiffs of fog. That's because this group here, the Rugga attempted to assault the 2 remaining bundukis in there. They triggered, by going into the dangerous terrain, they actually triggered the night rules, which are going to apply to the rest of the game now. And they also, on top of that, managed to lose the melee, which was a surprise because it was 5 against 2. So they lost a figure, both sides picked up a stress token, and that was about it really for that turn, but that phase, but that's quite enough to be getting on with. So the night rules, or the fog rules, are going to make it harder to achieve the goals of this scenario, because if you now pick up the pace, you gather a stress token as well. So in this particular phase, Mary hasn't moved closer to the corner, but this group of Ujuwa's young warriors is approaching them now. Rather than engage them in combat, which the soldiers are likely to win, I've discovered Mary's group is vulnerable to missile attack, so that's probably the intention there. And for the same reason that it's going to be difficult to get to the corners now, the Ujuwa's group have made a move now, so they're now out of the tree line, and they've got to get to a point about here somewhere. And that was about it for that phase. Okay, it looks like Ujuwa is going to get off this corner without too much problem. Over the other side though, I think Mary will probably make it, but because she's now got 3 groups over here, but there's these young warriors kind of in the way, causing a little bit of a problem, but there are 3 other groups on Mary's side here, so it shouldn't be too much of a problem. I think the rest of the game is just going to come down to who can get their various characters off the table. So this is the end of the first phase of turn 5. Ujuwa's group are right on the corner now, so it's unlikely that they're going to be stopped leaving the table. Over this side, Mary's a lot closer to the corner, but still got that one group threatening her that's got a panic token on it at the moment, so it can't actually do anything until it gets rid of that. And yeah, that's about it for that phase. End of phase 2 of turn 5. Ujuwa has left the table, so he's achieved his objective. Mary is still there. This group's managed to rally off their stress token, and this group also got rid of a stress token. Right, well, turn 5 has now ended. The last phase just involved the use of influence, so there was no movement or fighting or shooting. And it's now turn 6, so we're not sure now. We have to roll a dice to see if the game continues. So 5 or more on a D8 and it now ends. Yeah, it's a 5, so the game is now over, and Mary hasn't got to leave the table, but I suspect, I'll measure it in a moment, I suspect she is within M. So that's looking like she'll get some points for that, but not a lot, which means it's almost certain that Ujuwa has won this game as well. Anyway, we'll tot up the points and I'll let you know. Okay, so the result of that was Ujuwa definitely won. 30 victory points to Mary's 9. Mary scored 5 victory points for being within M distance of a corner. Ujuwa scored 15 for leaving by a corner, the corner. Also, his side had 3 discoveries, whereas Mary's only had 1. So he scored 12 victory points for that, whereas Mary only scored 4 victory points. And then Mary was really unlucky in her dice rolling for the other things. Not that it would have changed the result too much, but for eliminating Kuva, the talking drum, she was entitled to roll 1d8 because he was a 1-star character. Failed that dice roll, and for the reporter's characteristic, because she had scored 9 victory points, she was allowed to roll 3d6, each successful roll and a d6 giving her another victory point, and she failed all 3 dice rolls, whereas Ujuwa's side had the bulky loot token, and they rolled 3d6 and scored successes with all 3 for that, giving them another 3 victory points, so they ended up on 30, Mary only on 9. Again, there were things I forgot to do in that game. I forgot to use any of these talents. Can't say now whether that would have made a difference or not, but because I forgot for both sides, it probably balanced itself out. Next thing I have to do before I forget is roll for Kuva, the talking drum. You roll a d6. If it's 5 or 6, his condition doesn't deteriorate. Failure, and it does, and it's a success. So he gets away with having been eliminated during that round. So just update the log sheets now. So Ujuwa won scenario 5, so he'll get another 2 victory points for that. During the game he had 3 successful rituals, so he goes up 3 more here. The discoveries he made were remains, so he's now got a talent there. Magical plants, so he's got a 4th one of those, so he's now got 5 points for getting 4 magical plants. And sacred stones, that's the first sacred stones that he's found. What else we got to do here? Right, just pause the camera for a second. Okay, so Ujuwa exited the tabletop by the opposite corner to his deployment area. So that means he reaches Mary's camp, purifies it, and gains knowledge in one domain of his choice. So we're just going to cross off the next domain. So he now has the knowledge of ritual dance. No wild animals appeared in that game, but it would have been an elephant. It's a shame, so I've never played the elephant. And his character hasn't reached 4 domains of knowledge yet, so he doesn't go up in strength yet. As for Mary, she discovered, or her group discovered, artifacts. So you get another cross there. And nothing else to be added there. So the only other thing, I think, is to deal with the experience that each side has gained. Right, so the winner, that's Ujuwa, rolls a D10. He scored a 5. So that is, choose one of your characters. His combat value is moved up 1 die type. So D6 becomes D8, D8 becomes D10. Right, again, I'm just going to pause the camera for a moment. Okay, so just had to think about that for a minute, but I've decided to put the talking drums combat value up from D6 to D8. So that's the experience earned for the Ujuwa's side. Now, the loser, Mary, rolls a D6. She's rolled 4, and that says choose one of your characters. His shooting value is moved up 1 type. Right, so again, don't think you can adjust Mary Kingsley's result this way, so it's choice between the reporter or the Kirangozi Kiva. So I think I'm going to put the reporter's shooting value up from D6 to D8. Right, and I think that was everything I need to do for that game. So I hope you enjoyed watching that. There's one more scenario to play out, and then there's a sort of weird kind of chart that you have to follow at the end of all the 6 scenarios. But anyway, next game will be the final game of the campaign itself. See you on that one. Bye for now.